Join me on a fascinating journey where I show you some of the techniques used in scale aeromodelling. Welcome back to the channel, modelers. What I'm going to show you today is how to terminate the line ends, and I'm going to just crimp them. I would normally like to bind them with copper wire, but the situation that I've got here means I can't actually take these wires away to the bench and use them in a vise, which is the way I'd normally do it. So what I'm going to do is show you how I crimp these, and it's a completely valid way of doing it for control line. I don't think it looks quite as neat, but that's by the by. It's certainly strong enough if you do it right, and I'm going to show you how I do it. So I've got just here, I've got some heat shrink tubing, which I'm going to try and use. If it doesn't look right or won't fit, then I'll abandon it, but the idea is to try it. And I'll probably cut these into half so that I can get the two out of just one strip. Then we've got they do seem to be called thimbles, and it's probably not very easy to see, but it's a tiny little brass or copper ring. It's the sort of thing that you would normally squash to create an eyelet on material, tarpaulins and that sort of thing, but they're tiny. And then this piece of tube, although it says it's brass, I think it's aluminium, but it's thick-walled. It's not a thin tubing. It's quite thick-walled tubing, aluminium tubing. And to do the squashing, the crimping, I use a pair of pliers like these. And the reason I use these is that they've got this parallelogram action, and what that does is multiplies the amount of pressing force that you can put onto it. Really increases the pressure. And what I might actually do as well is put a little bit of piano wire in the jaws over where I'm clamping, just to make some indents that really will grip it. Right, so the first thing I'm going to do is actually lock the tailplane in a level position, and all I'm going to do is use two pieces of wood. In fact, there's just two pieces of plywood here, and I'm just going to use that and a couple of clips. So I'm just going to lay these on the airframe like that. And I'm just going to clamp them. Like that. So with the elevators clamped, I can now pull on these a little bit and nothing will happen at the back end. So first of all, let's cut this tubing in half. As I say, I may not, I may fit this and then find I don't like it and then remove it again. Right, so then we put the alley, or whatever it is, shiny silvery metal bit on. Then we feed it back through. And we get it to more or less where we want it. I'm going for about there. A little bit further. Out there. Then we put the thimble in. And we tighten up the tubing so that it grips it nicely. And then this bit is very important. We take the tail and we pass it back through the tubing again. Second time. In fact, I'm going to have to slacken it off just a bit to get that through. The thimble might fall out. We'll put it back if it does. And then we pull it tight again. The thimble didn't fall out. And then pull that big loop that we've just created fairly tight. Make sure the aluminium tube stays tight. So we're tightening everything up. I'm sorry you can't really see much of what's going on here. As you can see. And there we have it forming that loop. And we take our really tough pliers and we squash it. Now, I would have liked that thimble to have been a little bit tighter in there, but there we go, and that's it crushed. Right, I'm just going to put a piece of piano wire along the tube and then squash it some more, and then again at the end, and you'll see what that's done in a minute. And what that's done is put a sort of a heavier crimp in it. Some people use the cutter edge gently, but I don't like the idea of that because there's always the possibility that you might actually cut through it. Anyway, that's got that in there. So then you cut this little bit off the end, not too tight against it, but close. Then this next bit is very important and you really mustn't forget. I use really thin CA, the watery type stuff, and I soak it completely into that joint on both sides, and you can actually see it wicking in. I'm going to try putting a little bit on the thimble as well, just see if it holds it a little bit better. Right, and then we let that soak in and we let it dry for a few minutes while I do the other one. Now the important thing is the other one has to be exactly the same position, or very nearly exactly the same position, otherwise it's going to make the handle a little bit difficult to get right, to give you your neutral position. So we'll let that go off while I try and do the other one. And I'm actually really struggling to get this one just a little bit shorter. In fact, that is it. And that's within a fraction of the same length. Snip the line. Put a little CA inside. Let it soak in. This one I got much tighter, which is better, so the thimble is less likely to fall out. I have had them fall out before. It's not the end of the world, you just have to use the loop that remains until you put a thimble back in there. Right, the one thing I haven't done on this one is squashed it with a little bit of piano wire in there as well. So we'll do that. There we go, one little lump there, and then one on the other side. And before you fly it, you must do a pull test and make sure that they are absolutely strong. Now the next thing I'm going to do is just see if I can force this heat shrink over, right over all of this. I could have probably done with a little bit bigger. Next size up. I'm sorry if you're not actually seeing everything that's happening here. It's quite difficult to do. Describe and film. There we go, I eventually got that. So then I'm just going to take a soldering iron and just shrink that down, just to make it look nice. It's the only reason really. and it does stop it catching as well. And then we just make sure that we've got plenty of travel, and that should put these well away from crossing over so that they can't rub one against the other. And even with the connector on here, we should still be clearer than the cell. So there we go, that's how I do the crimps if I have to crimp them rather than wrap with copper wire. I'll show you how to wrap them with copper wire if there's enough interest. However, if you do a search on YouTube for Fred Cronenwert, an excellent control line modeler from the US, really does know his stuff, and he's been flying control line for as long as control line's been invented, I reckon. But Fred does some really good videos on how to wire wrap these. So I'd probably suggest you go to his video rather than try and make one myself, because he's actually better at it than I am. And he's made a jig, which is quite interesting to see. So if I could figure out how to put a link in my video for Fred's video, then I would. But I'm only an amateur at this sort of stuff. So dig him out, Fred Cronenwert, control line, and you'll find it. Just to give you some idea of the setup on this Piper Twin Apache, you can see there's only one or two of the lights actually fitted, or LEDs I should say. There's the flashing beacon underneath. There are other lights, but they're not wired at the moment. The wire is attached. You can see them top of the fin, top of the fuselage. There's wingtip lights as well, but the LEDs are not fitted. I just wanted to show you a few little interesting things. It's currently set up on my Jetty transmitter, which might be a little bit awkward to have on a tray around my neck because I haven't got a tray to match it. But you can see, various functions all seem to work. Flaps are working quite nicely. Rudder and steering and that sort of stuff all works. And I thought I'd just see if I can operate the retracts, just so you can see them going up, see what sort of speed. They are the very early versions of the E-Flight electric ones, and I got them many years ago now, and I was just hoping that they still worked. And you can see it's an interesting thing on the Apache that the wheels go up but still protrude a little bit, which is kind of interesting. I had hoped they'd hang down a little bit more than that. But it may be that the wheels are a little bit too small, and maybe they will hang down a little bit more scale once we get there. But the steering centres before the wheel goes up on the nose leg.
Capacity 37 milliamp hours.
And that gives you an idea of the speed. They're blooming noisy, but there we go. They do still function, which is good. The other thing that's kind of cool is if you set
capacity 38 milliamp hours.
When you set up throttle kill, usually it's fairly straightforward. But on the Jetty, it's a little bit more interesting, especially if you've got two motors. You'll notice both of them are spinning. And if I operate the throttle kill, both stop. So that was thanks to Harry Curzon. He showed me and helped me set up the settings for the Jetty to do a throttle kill for two motors. And they're both spinning. And they're both kill. So what I've also got to do is to set a flight mode or set a switch that will turn the starboard engine off. So I want to turn this one off or idle it right back during flight on a switch. And then I want to throw the switch back and bring it back up to match the same servo output as the other one. This is so I can fly asymmetric flight, which I think would be kind of fun. And obviously you don't throttle back the inboard engine, not in control line. Otherwise you may end up picking pieces up.